welcome back to the Growing Revolution Smart PotCast. I'm Eric Olson with Smart Pot, the original fabric planter, and this week our guest is Mark. He's the founder of the Green Pad CO2 Generator product line, and we saw him recently at the MJ Biz Expo in Las Vegas and asked if he would come on the podcast and tell his story of how he came up with the product and his journey in the industry overall. So, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Eric, I can't thank you enough for inviting me to be on your show, and it's always fun to talk to people about growing.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
You too.
I've run into Mark sporadically throughout the last decade, and he's always a super nice guy, fun to talk to. So, thank you for making the time to join us. So, Mark, what's your history with cannabis? Have you been growing for a while? How's your journey been with the plants?
Well, I just turned 64 last week, so my journey started as about a 16-year-old in Marin County, as it turns out, where I spent a couple years there going to school, high school, and so that was my first exposure to cannabis, but the first time I tried it, I should say. I grew up in San Diego County area, where my older brother was making regular trips to Tijuana, and it wasn't an unknown thing. I just was not at age that was interesting to me, and so we started. We saw what marijuana was about, and obviously it was the big bad thing at the time, and everybody had to be very careful of things, and we saw a lot of people get in trouble for it, which was a shame back then. But as far as I grew forward, I lived in Catalina Island for a little bit, and my brother and I did a little guerrilla grow up in the hills and outside of Avalon, California. So one of my first years growing, and moved back to my hometown of Vista, California, here in North San Diego County, and again continued my growing. And I bought Ed Rosenthal, the thin little book. I probably should grab it. That has that him and Mel Frank, which I think Mel was mostly responsible for, and we just read every line on that. And I started a little outdoor grow. Eventually, I put a 4-foot fluorescent light set up in a basement area, and then a couple of years later, I built a greenhouse during that time. About 2 years later, I bought my first metal halide in 1980, 81, where they were in the High Times magazine. They had the advertisements for these, at the time we didn't know they were street lights, but they were, it was the thing. And fortunately, the company that sold them was a local San Diego company. So, we took like 2 cars and transferred people and showed up at the front door of this place, and then drove down the street and transferred the light to somebody else. So nobody knew who picked the light up. And so, in any terms, we started growing. That was my first real, indoor grow. I'm not saying it went well. This was a learning experience from the get-go. But that's my history. And going forward, I've been a grower, hobby grower mostly. Myself outdoors in greenhouses, and we've had some indoor operations as well over the years. So that takes me to the current time where I still do a little backyard gardening here with smart pots, I might add, our favorites. And that's kind of the span of time from the mid 70s to current.
Yeah, so you're not a Johnny come lately. Mark's an OG of sorts in the industry. So how did you come up with the Green Pad CO2 generator? When was that, and how did that all come about?
Well, I'm in partners with some very smart people, and we had come together with new technologies. We work in the environmental gas industries, including ethylene gas removal and production, and so it just sort of came to us. And we've sort of made some adjustments to it to fit the particular needs of the indoor growing environment. And so we have different iterations of the product. And so we're able to fine tune each one to make them work for our particular application. And so initially, probably the Green Pad was probably first brought in around about 2007. And we had an indoor grow that we were using them in. And then probably about 2008, we brought it to market. Our first trade show was the 2009 THC Expo, which was awesome. It was the LA Convention Center. Nobody had ever seen anything of its kind like that before. I don't know if you're familiar with that show, but that was epic. Yep. Because up until that time, you couldn't even talk about marijuana, let alone go to a national convention site like the LA Convention Center. And I was fortunate to pick a really nice booth. I was right next door to Advanced Nutrients. And they were very impressive, man. They had the nice booth there with the big Hummer.
They went hard back in the day.
They went hard. They went hard and deep on that one. They do, and I talk to Big Mike when I see him at these shows. Right next to me was Greenhouse Seed Company.
Nice.
And then across from that was Harborside Health Center. So I was like in the middle of all these really awesome booths that brought a lot of people to us. Ed Rosenthal comes by my booth, as it turns out, and I didn't recognize Ed, even though I had sort of been a fanboy from the kid reading his books and everything and bought all the latest versions and asked Ed and all that shit. I didn't recognize him. In fact, Ed showed up to my booth and he had this blue blazer on with these like marijuana leaf gold epithets on here and little, like he was Captain Marijuana, man. And so I talked to him a little bit, explained my product. Not long later, his assistant came by and said, "Hey, Ed was at your booth. He really likes your product. He wants to know if you want to be in his next book." I went, "Ed was at my booth?"
Yeah. Where?
Really?
When?
Where? Really? Because, but he liked the idea that I probably didn't make a big deal about it. And so that sort of was, at that point in 2009, we didn't know that having an influencer was anything at all. I wouldn't even know the term. And so fortunately, Ed kind of put us in his books. He's been a big supporter. And in fact, I've shared booth space with Ed at a couple of trade shows. And, it's sort of a turnaround from the years ago when I was a grower reading his book to now, I'm working on this with his social media team right now to do us a little blast out there. So that's sort of my background as far as how the Green Pad kind of came into the indoor gardening scene and how I sort of, as a grower, became part of that.
Yeah. We love Ed Rosenthal. He was, I think, one of our first interviews on season 1, and he's such a humble guy for like his status in our industry. Like he's very humble. He doesn't really brag about himself.
No.
He's one of the coolest guys out there.
He knows everybody. You know what I mean? So I talked to Ed. We were talking in Phoenix at the Imperius Expo, and he was talking about going to go see Tommy Chong. And I'm like, oh man, Tommy Chong, that'd be cool to go hang out at Tommy Chong's house up in, and where he's in LA area. And he said what he found out about these celebrities, because, he's with Snoop Dogg and Willie. Everybody knows, Woody Harrelson. He said these celebrities, they feel like, I guess, people always are asking them for something. And so that's sort of like, so they like Ed because Ed never asked them for anything. They want to be around Ed because Ed has the history that goes back, as we know. But that was what I took back from Ed on that. So recently I sent to Ed a text and I said something to him about being a celebrity. And I go, I know you're busy and you're a celebrity. I'm not trying to ask you for anything, Ed, like this. He says, I'm not a celebrity. I'm just Ed. And so he's a good guy. Like I said, so I was just fortunate that back in the time, this just by happenstance that this colliding events happen, so to our great benefit.
Yeah. Ed's a living legend, and he was like one of the first people that I wanted to get on the podcast just to kind of chronicle his journey in cannabis, because he's getting up there in years. None of us know when our last day is going to be, so I'm really honored that I got to interview him. It was really cool.
He's a good guy. Like I said, I've the last couple of shows I didn't see him at MJ BizCon, and we were supposed to get together, but he had a hurt knee. But I was at the Arizona show. We spent a lot of time together again, and like I said, so it's good. When you can say you passed a joint next to Ed Rosenthal back and forth on more than one occasion, that's, I don't know if that's OG in the game, but it's that's a good status to be in,
That's as OG as anyone. We've lost a lot of the legends over the years. Jack Herrera, Eddie Lepp, and Ed's kind of one of those last dudes from the beginning of when cannabis really started taking off. So
he's a trip, isn't he?
He certainly is. So circling back to the Green Pad, can you explain to us how it works? Is there a chemical reaction with the water? I know you spray the pad with water to get it going. How is that working?
It's real simple chemistry. Very simple chemistry. It's a carbon and an acid, and what we do is they're layered in these pads, and they're multiple layers of this formula that's in there, and it's a simple reaction to humidity or moisture. The proportions that we have of the ingredients are set to react at about 35% ambient humidity. So anytime you pull them out of the original package that are all sealed up, then they actually will start releasing immediately. It's a slow release, but there's still a small release of CO2. So that's what, when we say hang, spray, and walk away, basically what we're doing is we're taking the pad, a little spray bottle, you just give it a little mist like this and hang it up. Now, it's going to tend to dry out in a garden. That they always do. So you can go in your garden once a day and spray them. Or what we also suggest is you can take like a sponge, real simple sponge, get it wet, put it in the middle of the pad, and fold it up. I'm doing this backwards here. And then kind of clip it on there. You're just basically trying to keep that sponge moist in there, and that's enough moisture to activate the chemistry. The more moisture, the faster the CO2 releases. So you kind of want a nice slow release. A lot of gardeners, what they'll do is right before they get ready to close up their garden, they'll either give it a little mist or they'll get that little, just give it a little squeeze and get that moisture to wick through the pad. And if it dries out a little bit more, wet it down a little bit. It's designed to last up to about 2 weeks, depending on how wet you get it. You put it under water, then it's going to go away quicker. But if you want to let it go a nice slow release, and hanging a couple of these at a time in your tent would probably be just enough to give you about double the ambient CO2 that most tents are in. So it's real simple. Like I said, the chemistry is very easy to use. There's nothing growing, and nothing happens until you pull the pads out of the package. So they could sit there on the store shelf or in your garden ready to use. A lot of guys will take these and keep a couple packs of these granddaddy pads, which is our bigger version of it, on hand, because if your tank runs out and you're running at 85 degrees and 2400 TDS, how long you want to run without CO2? So having the backup plan with these green pads, especially these granddaddies, see, these guys are big. This is just another bigger version. It's the same product. Different machine makes these. In fact, we just built a new machine in San Luis Obispo to make new pads. But this is a much bigger version. Again, a sponge in the middle really helps it out a lot, because we want to keep the moisture, keeping that chemistry alive. And the other thing is when you're using the green pads, you go, well, gee, how do I know if they're working? It's real simple.
Right.
You take a pad and you take a little corner of it, and get it a little wet. And I don't think you can hear this with this damn microphone, but this thing is sizzling away. Where's the microphone on this fucking thing? There it is. Anyway, so that the pad starts sizzling. You can actually hear the CO2 release. It's an easy reaction. So when that stops doing that, then you know that then it's done, and it's time to replace, put a new one in. So that's real easy. It's either on or it's off, and you can slow it down by lowering the humidity or raise it up by adding moisture.
Okay.
Simple stuff.
And so you said it lasts for about 2 weeks. Is that like is that the is there a range as far as how long it lasts, depending on the size of your tent or how often you're misting it?
Yeah, we try to put 2 of those in a 4x4 room, like one light for 2 of the original green pads. And again, this is a little give or take. This is a passive CO2 system. So we're going to have to kind of depend on the grower to kind of keep an eye on the pads and keep them either moist or put the sponge in there. And so typically the regular green pads, the original green pads, after about a week is when their highest release of CO2 happens. But after a week, there's still some left. So that's why we suggest we leave them in there for like 2 weeks. So you're sort of cycling and stacking in new ones and old ones, and that way you kind of keep your levels higher without, you want to make sure you kind of wring out every bit of CO2 the pads have.
Yeah.
And so that gives you a cycle stacking. The granddaddy pads are so much bigger, there's so much more formula in there that they're actually designed to last about 21 days. Again, the suggestion is after about 2 weeks, you might want to put another one in there. Some growers will leave them in there for longer without doing that. So it's sort of you could dial it in for your own needs. If you want to run 1800 ppms in your garden, you're just going to have to hang more green pads up. You can get there. It's just like opening the valve on your tank or turning it on your burner. There's some, cost to play. You're going to replace your tank or you're going to buy, natural gas for your burner. Yeah. Either way, that's how we could put more CO2 in the garden based on how many green pads you. There you go. Okay.
So Mark, what do you think the optimal CO2 level is for the garden?
I think that for most hobby growers to get anywhere double or more ambient is very effective. I think that for the few plants you're growing at a time, that I think that's going to be very noticeable. So again, actual levels, I think, if you're running 450, 500 ambient, at least 900 to 1,000. Our growers, some growers get higher levels. If somebody will get just that double ambient, actually I'm okay with that because I think that that's effective. I think you'll see, you'll be able to turn your garden up temperature-wise a little bit more. You'll be able to feed your plants a little bit more, and the combination of those 3 things is going to give you, I think, more growth, bottom line, and more weight. And so,
Yeah.
it's sort of carbon in and carbon out. We're putting more carbon in there, and it's going to turn itself into the carbon of the flower. And without that, you're just going to be whatever the ambient is. And in some grow environments, especially the tents, when they're trying to kind of seal them up in some ways, you're going below ambient levels because you got a plant, canopy full of plants, and they're sucking up CO2. You can definitely see the reduction of CO2. That's why even getting way ahead of that in any levels is going to be a benefit.
Yeah, I actually did an experiment like a month ago. I shut off the CO2 tank to my tent and then let the tent, just run with the lights on for about 5 or 6 hours just to see like how low the CO2 would get. And when I checked like 6 hours later, it was like at 200, where normally it's at about 400 if the tent was wide open. So yeah, if you're not supplementing with
Right.
CO2 and you have a closed environment, your plants are starving for
Yeah, and
CO2.
it's hard to sometimes to show people that because they think, well, we should be able to get higher levels right away, and the bottom line is you're having to battle the actual plants respiring, and so there's physiology going on right there, and so again, our goal as a product for the hobby industry mostly is to get those growers to see the higher levels that see the actual plant growth. Now,
Yep.
it's the difference between 900 to 1,000 to 1,200. I think it's hard to quantify that to a lot of people. And so, and there's a lot of wasted CO2. So again, I think that the idea is there's a real benefit to adding CO2, and it comes down to, how much you're comfortable paying for that benefit. It's again, now if you want to have a constant level of 1,500, then your best bet is to get a sniffer and a tank or a burner and just go with that system. Is the difference between that 300 or 400 ppms? Sure, I'm sure it's significant. How much? I think that's Then you start calling in. That becomes the how good a grower you are. You know what I mean? There's so many other parameters, so many factors going on there that one thing isn't all end all be all. I'm going to run more CO2 that way I can not feed as often. There's you have to kind of have everything firing on all cylinders, or it's like trying to put nitrous on a jalopy. You're just
Yeah.
not going to get to the. It's not going to work. So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah. A lot of people don't know, like, if you add CO2 to the grow, there's other factors. Most
sure,
people are like upping their nutrients
obviously,
because, basically your plant's metabolic process
right,
is running faster. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
if you drop out the CO2, a lot of things change. So it might not be like a one-to-one,
Well,
comparison
the
there.
one thing we know about growing is that you need three things. You need light, water, and CO2. The nutrients don't even play in that equation.
Right.
So that's a critical part of the process. And again, we're Green Pads are happy that we're just one small part of an industry that allows our technology to be used and benefit these growers and to see the feedback from store owners that we've been working with for 10, 12 years. And, we try to communicate our product well by our YouTube videos and being on the podcast and whatnot. But also, we're growers. We're people that started when you said something about, I tell people all the time, we didn't jump onto this green bandwagon. As a grower from, my background, we were the guys that started this shit. And so to carry on, to have a product in this industry, it's almost like you couldn't even believe that. I wouldn't believe, as an 18-year-old, I would have never thought that this would ever happen. So, but we're grateful to be part of a great industry. And then, we met so many great people and all these trade shows we've done all over the country. And we've met store owners and growers and other industry leaders and stuff. And it's been fun. I mean, it's not a bad way to try to make a living.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they say necessity is the mother of invention, and most of the products in our industry came from growers, like yourself, who identified a need or something that was lacking in their system, and either went out and sourced it from another industry or just kind of invented it.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's really cool to hear
That's a
those
cool thing.
stories
Yeah.
in person.
Now I know you were going
Um,
to ask me about the cloning pads, the Green Pad Juniors.
Yeah,
I think
so
that
you've got, a small version of the Green Pad for clone domes, and I've used it myself years back, and I definitely noticed an improvement. How much faster will people see root development using the Green Pad there?
a number came up yesterday on another podcast you and I discussed earlier. HLG Group has a podcast, and Steven Johnson, who's their CEO that started that company, he happened to be talking about using Green Pad Juniors, and his take on this was 30% faster. And so that's the first number that came to mind. That sounds about right. So definitely, I think the idea, what happens is when putting CO2 in that clone dome, is we're actually feeding the stomata of these cuttings, because at the point that they're cut and there's just this bare stem, there's nothing keeping them alive but the humidity in the dome and the carbon dioxide. It's now force feeding into that stomata, which produces sugars, which equals roots. And so two things happen. We're kind of jacking up that level to kind of speed up that process, but also carbon dioxide is keeping the leaves green and the cuttings. They don't want to, because we're slowing down their respiration. We're feeding them now instead of having them respire out. And so they're the typical thing is that all your cuttings will root most of the time, and you'll see very little, if any, yellow leaves in that whole tray. And 2 to 3 days twister. I think the average probably is 5 to 6 days to root on most cannabis plants, for instance. And that's usually when the dome comes off. And when the dome is off, then you're done using the Green Pad Juniors. Now, if you want to, and you want to go into your veg room and you want to hang up the Green Pads, there you go. The CO2, continues. So, but yeah, I've been super proud of this because nobody had really discovered that there's a real benefit to adding CO2 to the clone domes. And we sort of, using our original Green Pads, hanging them right over our open cloners, we thought, wow, the cuttings are looking really good, but I don't need to fill the whole room with CO2 to just feed these little plants. So we changed we put a smaller pad, and we just have there's only, all that's in here, by the way, is just a CO2 form. There's nothing else in here. There's no absorbing medium. There's nothing else. It's just our powder. And so I made these pads to make about 400 cc's of gas over about 2 days. We could have put more in there, but all of a sudden, there's no benefit to having a high CO2 level of those cuttings. They like it. I think anywhere between 600-800 is a sweet spot for those cuttings, and that's when you see the faster growth and the no leaves turning green. And so that's why we made them that way. We can make them last longer, but there wasn't a benefit to that. So it worked out that 400 cc's for about 2 days, and then you put another one in, and usually about the third time, after about 6 days, then the dome is off and you're off the veg. So, but this is something that I think that more commercial growers ought to look at. And we're working on a program right now to sell these to bulk to the commercial growers. Because if you're doing 500 trays, you're not going to buy the 10-pack retail pack of Green Pads. And so, but in bottom line is, so that's something I'm real proud of. We got a lot of great feedback, almost the best feedback we get. And I'll tell you the reason, Wiz, is because you can really see the effect in your little dome. It's very effective in a few days. If you're growing and you're waiting, you got weeks to go to see shit happen at the very end, and the Green Pad's part of that process. And overall, it's going to make an effect, but you're not going to see it today, But in 2 or 3 days with your clone domes, you go, shit, this is working really well, which is sort of somewhat proof of concept for people to say, well, if these things work, and these bigger ones are 40 times stronger than this one, and so there's a way for people to see. There we go. These are people to see how these can be scaled up for larger areas. Yeah. So that's something, like I said, really proud of the Green Pad Junior, and sort of we've taken a whole new skew in this industry, with our Green Pads being a unique technology, but then now having a new way of propagation. So that's sort of our one of our, I think, claims to fame on that now, is that that's something nobody ever thought of. I mean, until I made a product that was reasonable to make that work.
Yeah, I mean, before the Green Pad Junior, to get CO2 into my clone dome, I would just open up one of the vents and breathe into it, or take a bong hit and blow it into the dome. And I mean, just intuitively, I'm sure I was boosting up the CO2 just by doing that. But your method is much easier.
Your
much
nasty mouth is full of all kinds of shit. You want to blow that shit on your nice plants in there. It's not a sterile environment anyway. You basically, when you put a cloning tray with a dome on there, you literally just made a mold factory. Yeah. And so carbon dioxide is antimicrobial gas. It displaces oxygen and ethylene gas, and it's like, as it changes the pH of anything it touches, and so it slows down the ability for all those botrytis growth, gray mold. These things have a harder time to grow in a high CO2 environment. We don't make a big deal about that, but that's the science behind our product. The CO2 is it's an antimicrobial gas. And so, so when you make that little mold factory and you put CO2 in there, you're slowing the ability to reduce the pathogen growth that always happens when
Yeah,
you see
yeah.
something, you're heating it up, you're putting a light on it, really, I mean, that's how else would you grow mold?
That's a really good point, and I know the state regulators would have a problem with you claiming that on the packaging or the label, but that is something we definitely can talk about.
It's just not
Because
something that's aware of. Oh, I definitely have the claims to be made. There's no question that could be. It's a scientific fact that carbon dioxide is an antimicrobial gas. It displaces lighter gases like ethylene and oxygen,
yep,
and it changes. And anything that carbon dioxide touches, it turns into carbonic acid, and so it lowers the pH. And those are the things. And you need that. Those are the things that make this less conducive for mold growth and more conducive for plant growth. So that we not make a big deal about it is because nobody really cares at that point. They just want to pull, it's not this big an issue, but it's the fact that that's what this product does. And so it might be some small benefit. I'm not making that their biggest claim, but it is,
yeah,
it
yeah.
is definitely what it does. So, yeah.
So kind of changing gears, you had mentioned that you were a Smart Pot user. When did you get into, using Smart Pots in your garden, and do you have a favorite size that you like to use?
Uh, I'd have to say it had to be when we started at Heavy T's Grow Show. So when we were at that, we just people that don't know, there's a podcast that started. God, when did Tyler start that? 2010, 2011, maybe.
Probably about then.
About that time, and we were on a podcast that our company was. We were fortunate that we were there with a group of leaders like General Hydroponics and Smart Pots and Blue Lab and a ton of other companies. And on that podcast, we got to meet everybody, all the other vendors that were part of that podcast. And so I was exposed to, probably from listening to Heavy T talking about it on the Heavy T Grow Show. So up until that point, I think I just did like everybody else. I used black plastic pots, And so, in fact, I think that's the year I did a nice drain to waste project in my greenhouse, and with all 15 to 20 gallon smart pots. And so that's what we use. And then the great thing about it, obviously, is the reusability of them. And so you just buy them once, and then you clean them out supposedly, and then and reuse them. And so we did have, my wife and I always we kind of used it up, was the I don't know the size. I think it's the 50, the round one. It's about 4 foot wide, and it's about that deep.
Oh, like the big bag bed.
The big bag one, yeah. We use that to death. I use it every year, and so
Nice.
no, we love Smart Pots. I think they certainly have shown people how the disadvantages of those plastic pots. I think the idea that they breathe and that you don't end up overwatering your plants. You know what I mean? It's so nice to be able to go over there and pick them up and see how heavy they are. You'll know whether it's time to water or not. And so
Yeah.
I think that the Smart Pot brand is really, obviously the leader in the industry. And like I said, as a grower, I recognize the benefits of it, and I've used them, years and years. Don't have a garden this year, though. I didn't do one this year. So it was sort of like took the year off the first time in a while. And it was honestly because there was a lot of produce in the market. I didn't want
Yeah,
So-
yeah. Wholesale prices are ridiculously low these days. Especially in California. You can.
It's we all have to be careful what we wish for. That whole the legalization and everything else. It was it's sort of like any other commoditized product now. We're all just part of a chain of commodity. It's just you're trading like you do any other produce or fluid commodity, and if people want to sell it cheaper, then somebody will buy it cheaper, and so
Yeah.
that's where the market's going to be. I don't know. I mean, until we get nationally, federally decriminalized or legalized, taken off the scheduling, then we'll see how the state-to-state transfers go along. I think that's going to be the tell how we can legally go from state to state. Because it's going to be interstate commerce. I mean, it's going to be. I think somebody's going to sue somebody saying, "Hey, you're limiting our ability to be in a legal market to traverse the state lines or whatever we have to do to get into from one legal market to the next." I don't know exactly about how that will work, but I think we're all going to be. We've been witnessing history for the last 20 years, 15 years hard, and no reason for that to change now. So.
Yeah, I think state to state commerce and then international commerce is going to be a whole nother thing to unload when you
Yeah,
got packs coming from Canada and
Colombia.
Colombia, and
Yeah.
should
I
be
mean, you got to
interesting.
say, somebody that said, wow, Colombia could pull off something good. Unfortunately, I think the bottom line is that the industry is just I don't see any market for it. The outdoor market is nil, and so I don't know where the lines are drawn on that. Um, I prefer indoor.
Yeah,
I think a
yeah,
lot of
me
people that
too.
have been doing this is like, and so you go, what? That's which is a shame because it's kind of where we all started, outdoors, free sunshine, and now we got to pay for the sun every day for 10, 12 hours a day, and so
Well, the thing is, I mean, indoor is always going to, or not always, but indoor should be the best because you're just trying to mimic
of
Mother
course,
Nature and you're eliminating, variables of rain and pests and disease,
yeah.
hopefully. So, yeah, indoor cannabis should be better than most outdoor, although I have to say some of the best I've ever sampled has been outdoor. So
Well, I think
you can do well either way.
it started at that you get the taste of the earth. You know what I mean? We all know that you're either you get the taste of the salt, so you get the taste of the earth. If you're only doing indoor and it's all hydro and it's just there is definitely advantage there. And I think that there's a place for both items. I just think that as consumers, I think what's happened now is everybody's so wise now. This is just now you got in the town that I live in here in North San Diego County. Um, there was a battle for dispensaries here, and I was very involved in it. I spent some time talking in front of the city council here, promoting the idea that they should acknowledge that the voters have voted for this. They just need to implement it. And there was a couple of members on the city council, including our mayor, who was just was stubborn, just would not acknowledge it. And so finally the voters came to pass, and they've actually allowed to have 11. Originally was medical stores put in our town of Vista, North County, San Diego County, and uh, and now those are all now recreational. And the funny thing about it is they were kicking and screaming to get these 11 stores open because they were medical. The time when everything turns to recreational, not a word was mentioned. Nobody could care less. I mean, it was like there wasn't
Really?
any big bub. Oh no, now anybody can go into these stores. Well, anybody could go into stores before probably. So, but the full battle that these politicians put on, at least in my local market here, it was like what a lot of wasted resources. They went for years chasing these stores down, and they would open up down the street. And I had several friends that were very involved with this. You would think, and had stores that were black market stores, I suppose. But now they have the nice indoor. They have the legal store, and they're in Oklahoma. The guys all over the place. And so shout out to Tradecraft Farms in Vista, by the way. Our buddy Brent, an
Nice.
old family friend, and my nephew works for him. And so, but they kind of went around the back way to it. Now they're in the legal form. So the bottom line is I think now with people that are smarter about where they go, they're looking for terpene profiles, and they want to see, your CBD, CBN, THC levels, and have that all how that matches up to their particular needs. And so, how we do that on the outdoor basis, I don't know. I think the indoor growers have those genetics a little more refined, and I think they can pull to fruition at the very moment that this stuff hits perfect ripeness. And
Yeah.
that's you're limited to what you can do outdoors. My personal opinion, anyway.
You know what kills me about the retail market these days is how we went from the deli style dispensaries, where you got a big jar or a big bag and you can see exactly what you're going to get. You can touch it, you can smell it. But now everything is in Mylar bags, and sure, it's got a label with a terpene profile and a THC percentage, but you know that tells you literally nothing about the grade of what you're trying to consume. I don't know. I just miss the good old days personally.
Yeah, we don't get to touch it anymore, and and I will say they're getting very creative in the packaging. I was in a store last couple weeks ago, and was see what they had, and we were looking for a little bit of keef. My wife likes a little keef on her bowl sometimes at night. She has some pain issues, and so they don't always have keef. But what they did offer is we have keef, but it comes with an eighth of bud, and so you get a gram of keef, and you get an eighth of bud, and it's all sealed up, and you couldn't open it or see it. I go, well, $35, okay, what the hell? And so, but when you open up, what you find out is the buds are smalls. It's hard to tell when they're packaged in this. It looks like, so they're taking basically, good on them. They found a way to market some fairly unmarketable product. It was probably outdoor keys with some small, I don't know. It was just sort of a trial. I wanted to just try it. Sometimes I go to these stores. I just want to see what they have to offer, just to see for myself what's going on. Like I said, as an OG in this industry, I want to know, well, what are people doing now? And I found that very interesting, and I don't know that I would buy it again, but
hey, I did see something really cool recently. I don't know what company it was, but they were saying they're going to have scratch and sniff Mylar bags.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I saw that there's one grower somewhere in California that's coming out with cannabis terpene infused scratch and sniff stickers.
Oh, no kidding.
That they're putting on their bags so that people could actually smell before they buy, which I thought was pretty cool, if it works.
I'm just trying to think about that. Yeah, okay, that's out there. That's pretty out there, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Hey,
I guess if you can't open up the Mylar, a scratch and sniff sticker is, I suppose, the next best option.
I guess I suppose that how true to the smell that would be, and that sounds like a costly proposition. Just open a bag, let them smell it.
Yeah. I'm interested to try out. So whatever company is doing that, they could send me a sample. I'll make sure it works.
Well, if we made lottery tickets like that too, that'd be great, wouldn't it? You go buy the lottery tickets and you do that, so.
Now you're talking crazy. So, Mark, where can growers purchase the Green Pad? Are you online? Are you going to be in hydro stores? Are you distributed by the distribution companies too?
Yeah, we have actually. We've been working with Hydro Farm now for about 6-7 years now. 6-7 years. We stayed away from all the distributors the first 5 or 6 years. When I first got into this, there was a bloodbath going on between Sunlight and Hydro Farm, knocking each other off. And I saw I didn't need to be in the middle of that. And so we stayed away for about the first 5 years. We were self-distributed. You can only buy direct. We were selling right to hydro stores. But, pardon me, but after about 5 years, I knew I needed to have a distributor because not everybody wanted to buy a one-off product from the store. They're too busy. Fortunately for us, Aaron Lowe, who was one of the Hydro Farm reps in Southern California and I used to see him at the Heavy Teas Grow Show. He was such a good guy. He actually was out when he was talking to his Hydro Farm customers, telling them about green pads and says, hey, you should buy these green pads, even though he wasn't selling them. And so I was super grateful that Aaron did that. And so at some time, Aaron came to me and says, listen, Hydro Farm would like to distribute green pads. We see them out there in all the stores, and we think that we could sell them well. And so because they were, it was sort of a loyalty thing. At least Aaron's point of view, he was able to get us to introduce these stores. And so I'm a loyal guy. You show me that kind of loyalty and I'll work with you every day. And so that's how to put us in with Hydro Farm. We've been with them since then. Now we do have direct store accounts as well. It's not an exclusive deal with Hydro Farm. Not everybody buys from Hydro Farm, so we can't, close that down. We also have been in Australia for many years now. We work with Stealth Garden Supplies down there, and so they've done very well with us. We're also in New Zealand, and through Stealth and through another company down there as well. And so the brand's been exposed around the world. We're trying to get ourselves a little more into the UK, into Europe, into those other markets, in South Africa. We have a small distributor in Brazil that we're playing with right now. He's been down there. So we're trying to expand it right now. Most of our product is sold in the U.S. and some Canada. We just picked up a new Canadian distributor. And so people can buy them. You can get them on Amazon. I have several direct Amazon vendors for us. And then because we sell through Hydro Farm, they sell to a lot of other online vendors that we don't know about. So the bottom line is there's quite a few stores around the country that have been stocking this product for years and years. If for some reason people viewing this podcast are looking for the product and they don't find them, hit us up. We'll be sure to either find a way to get to you direct or find a local store that carries them, or in many cases talk to the stores about stock of the product because they're busy. They don't have time to look at everything. But honestly, most stores that start carrying the green pads, it becomes a stock item that they have. They recommend it. We send a lot of product out to the guys behind the counters. So we get a hold of hydro stores and we say, listen, are you a grower? And they go, yeah, well, let me send you some of my product. You try it, see what you think. Now they become a believer. Somebody walks in the store, they're saying, hey, I tried this shit, I got 1,000 ppms, 1,500, great, or my clones blew up. And so this is the firsthand sort of connection that I try to personally make with all these store owners. We've been doing this for a long time, and we're sort of hot and cold on getting connected with the stores because it's sort of the flux of the industry. But the bottom line is that's where people can buy the green pads. A lot of hydro stores, obviously Amazon online stores as well. And like I said, everybody wants to reach out, Green Pad CO2 at AOL.com, because I'm AOL because I'm that old. And so you guys send me an email. Any question? Anybody wants a sample? Hit me up. We're happy, to get our product out there into the market. And if sending out some products, if we can just ask those growers to, tag us on Instagram or do the things like. My social media game is totally weak. We try to do a lot of things here, and I'm trying to up that a little bit, but we can use the help. So growers want to contact us, say, I'd like to try your product, hit me up, send me an email. We'll show you some samples. Just tell us what you think about it. After 14 years, we know the product works and people like it, but we're still, there's new growers out there that never heard of it before. Never heard of a good smart pot. Because they're kind of new to the game. We just can't assume that all the work we've done in the last 12, 14 years is going to pay off the day. We have to continually sort of reinvent ourselves and do brand building, and that's why I walked the show at MJ BizCon. I didn't have a booth there, but I literally drove over. It's a 300-mile drive from my house there, and just spent the day walking around, running into stores that we happened to run into, and then again the vendors and whatnot. And fortunately, Eric from Smart Pot, and then kind enough to invite me on the podcast. So that I try to stay out there, involved in the industry and the community.
Yeah. Well, we're continually farming for new growers and customers, and I've been in the industry for 15 plus years, but there's people getting into it every day who are brand new and hungry for that knowledge, and hopefully some of them are watching the podcast and go pick up a green pad or two.
Yeah, no,
and a smart pot.
Of course, absolutely, and grow indoors.
Yes. Yeah, if you're growing indoors, it's safer, less likely of people, stealing your valuable crops.
That happened before.
Less likely to have insects get into the environment, disease, and you have a lot more control. So, Mark, we could chat all day about plants and history, and maybe we'll have to have you back on in the future. But I wanted to really thank you for your time and coming to join us here. It's been a great interview.
Hey, listen, I appreciate it. And like I said, the people at Smart Pots are great. We've been working with you guys as far as team members at these podcasts, and then like you mentioned, we've been going, all the Maximum Yield shows and Indo Expos, MJ BizCons, cannabis high time shows. Jesus, it goes forever. But that's, if you're into the business, like I know you are too, Eric, you like to talk to the people and sort of communicate them face to face, and just no better place to do that than these trade shows. And now hopefully a little exposure on the podcast helps, convey our message as well. And so, but again, I really appreciate you asking me to be on, and I'm hopeful that I gave some information that was helpful to people. And again, we're greenpadco2.com if you want to find direct information. Marco Greenpad on YouTube, where we have quite a few videos on how the product works, one step by step, 1, 2, 3, and industry experts like, I don't know if do you know who Casey Jones Frazier is? Casey is the R&D head of R&D at Hydro Farm, and he used to own a store in Garden Grove Organics in Covington, Kentucky, and he was a big proponent of green pads. So I ran into him at one of the trade shows. He got a great shout out about, I love these things. We took some wilted basil clones and we brought them back to life. It's a great little video I filmed at one of the shows. But now he's the head of R&D at Hydro Farm. So we re-edited that video because now I don't have store owner that's a nice guy. Now I have the word of one of the head leaders of the industry that actually investigates this stuff, putting the shout out, green pads, he likes them and they work good. So we'd like those are our connections of the industry, and going on YouTube to see that stuff. If that helps people, great. And again, get back to me with any more questions, or if those people want to hit me up for samples, we're pretty well stocked up.
Yeah. Well, growers out there, don't starve your plants. They need CO2. They like lots of CO2. more than 400 ppms, they will take, and they'll eat it up, and they'll love you for
Just
it. So
hang, spray, and walk away. That's it.
nice.
All right.
And on that note, Mark, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. Hey, well, hope to see this podcast out soon, and we'll be happy to share it with all the followers that we have out there in social media land. So, Eric, you have a great day. Again, I appreciate it. And anytime we can talk plants and growing, it's always a good day.
Looking forward to seeing you at the next trade show.
You betcha. You betcha. Thank you so much.